Okay, very good. Why don't we begin with Bella Robinson? And remember, you have 3 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you for listening to my testimony. My name is Bella Robinson. I've been a prostitute for 35 years. Earlier, I talked about being sexually assaulted in prison for 5 years, even though I was on the street for $20 and was a prostitute, and I didn't get the same reaction. And one thing we know is we don't want sex trafficking to occur. We don't want to see our own people harmed. And I feel the pain that many people have gone through. But criminalization didn't stop what happened to them. So when sex workers can't go to the police and tell them who's trying to rob and rape them or control them, that perpetrator continues that abuse. Coyote surveyed 63 sex workers in conjunction with Brown University with the funding from the American Sociology Association. 79% of them said they had tried to report crimes to the police, were turned away. 21% that they were threatened with arrest, and 6% they were actually arrested for trying to report a crime. Police officers refer to us as NHI, for no human involved. This becomes about who's worthy and who's not worthy. Congress has spent billions of dollars funding trafficking organizations to create awareness about trafficking, host public trainings and how to spot it, or encouraging the community to call the police on sex workers. We've had ICE and Homeland come to our state with racist Asian Messiah raids of women in their 50s and 60s, and the police got to confiscate $650,000 of their life savings. Again, we're not saying there's no victims, but we just recently did a huge amount of FICA requests, and over 20 years in Rhode Island, both state and federally, there's only been 13 cases and 20 defendants. Now, federal law says forced coercion or fraud need to be used or a minor involved. But state laws, if someone gives me a ride somewhere or me and another sex worker are in a hotel doing a double, we're guilty of felony pandering or promoting. If we have adult children that live at home, they can be arrested for felony living off our proceeds. If we have minor children, they can be taken away from the state without any proof that we're bad parents. I got my first solicitation arrest 2 weeks after I turned 18. I was a child bride in foster care, married off to a 41-year-old man at age 17, and I had rather been on the street. I pled not guilty, had the adjudication withheld, and this day you can go to Pinellas County website and pull it right up. Prostitution conviction withheld. That served my fate. I couldn't go to college. I couldn't have a life. Landlords, it's guilty of a felony if they rent to us. So having convictions mean we don't access safe housing, and we're more likely to be exploited. We're discriminated in child custody and future jobs. But I also have I want to talk a little bit about Dr. Chang. He just gave a report that since you've criminalized prostitution in 2009, all STDs have gone up. And
yes,
plenty more in there.
That is your time. Of course. And you can submit any written testimony. Perfect. Next, does anyone have any questions for that witness? No. Next is Celine
Means.
Means, yes.
Hello.
Welcome to
Hi.
the Judiciary Committee.
Hello.
You may begin.
I'm Celine Means. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator at Rye Cares, which is Rhode Island Communities for Addiction Recovery Efforts. I'm also speaking to represent Weber Renew, Project Weber Renew. And so I will be brief as I have given out my written testimony to all of y'all. But I wanted to reiterate that the same thing as with drug use and sex work is something that you cannot just criminalize away and make go away. Also, criminalization just makes life worse for everyone, and it makes it harder for people to heal in whatever way that they need. It is so often that people are afraid of calling the police for an overdose, to talk to their health provider about any sort of concerns because they're fear of being called on the police or just being arrested, as Bella also brought out. Rhode Island already has been really the forefront of the country around harm reduction, in saying, and which has been prioritizing the dignity of people who engage in activities rather than focusing on ending the activities, such as our Good Samaritan legislation, decriminalizing fentanyl test strips and buprenorphine, and authorizing a harm reduction center. This is the same principle that humane and effective approach is better than punitive laws. Decriminalizing sex work makes everything healthy and safer for everyone, as putting people in handcuffs does not make their life healthier or safer. It only makes it harder to, as we said before, get housing, get jobs, get health care, and that sorts of things. I want to reiterate this quote from Rich Holcomb, who created Project Weber, which is a support group for male sex workers. He said, "By removing the stigma, more people will seek help and acknowledge substance use as a part of their life or their past. If something is criminalized, you make it difficult to talk about and admit to. People don't get the right resources and support." Again, I reiterate that this is harm reduction. This is really progressing our thoughts about how we can help people and treat people with dignity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Yes, Senator Archambault.
Yeah, I just respectfully, I'm thinking, you're talking about harm reduction. It comes to utilitarianism principle from John Stuart Mill, Mill's harm principle. Act on that maxim as if thy will be a universal law of nature. You're not supposed to do any harm. Hippocratic oath is grounded in that. I get it. I'm all for rehabilitation in every way, shape, or form. All I deal with are addicts in my practice, right? And I have an addicted personality. That said, we just heard some extremely compelling testimony from people whose lives were absolutely devastated. And I understand your argument, but to say that the criminalization of the offense itself is the root of all evil, you lost me there. I think the expungement statute probably needs to be tweaked, as the prior witness just testified to. There should be something done with the expungement statute. People shouldn't be penalized who actually are the victims of this. But to take the whole concept itself and to say that the whole law, that, decriminalization is going to be this panacea, it's going to just completely eliminate everything. It's not a panacea to our drug problems, and I'm an advocate of decriminalizing most drug statutes, but it's not a panacea. It's a global approach, and we just heard some extremely compelling testimony that I certainly won't be able to get out of my mind or heart. And I just suggest to you, I commend your courage for coming up here and saying what you're saying, and we take everything in sincerely, and I'm not harping on you, but I'd ask that you keep an open mind to what you just heard here. There were some powerful things that were said here this evening.
Oh, absolutely,
Thank
which
you.
is why I practice under restorative justice practices of how is the harm actually going to be addressed. In the justice system, like, how is putting someone away in cuffs actually answering the question, why did this happen? How did this come to happen?
Thank you. Senator Archambault.
Let me give you a practical answer to that in certain instances. This morning, we had somebody in front of me in court, somebody I was actually prosecuting in front of the judge in district court, who had a lengthy history of substance abuse tied into some shoplifting offenses. And that person was in pretrial services. Have you heard of pretrial services? Pretrial services unit. Pretrial services is just like it sounds. Pretrial, it's a unit as part of the court, district courthouse, where people can be sent for counseling while their case is pending, mental health counseling, substance abuse counseling, those kind of things. And with a global approach and a global mindset, you tend to have this, holistic's a strong word, but you have this open-mindedness that's rooted in a holistic approach to try to heal the person. I haven't seen in any of my experience in 22 years in court and thousands of criminal cases, defending and prosecuting, I truly haven't seen anyone have a mindset that we're just gonna, we wanna lock you up because you're addicted to drugs or you've got an offense. Now, if you're a dealer, zero sympathy. You could be on the fringe and just be a minor small-time dealer. You're gonna get a building dropped on you. There's no sympathy in the system built in for anybody who deals because it's predatory. But addicts and people who are victims of crimes, prostitutes themselves, I think that, when you're arrested, very often the system will get you a certain measure of help. I know that. Nobody in this world could tell me any differently because I've been dealing with it for years in court. I have firsthand experience with it. But I do respect the spirit of decriminalization in general. But I think here there's been a louder voice and it's part of a conversation that this bill just wouldn't address. This bill would lose everything that was just testified to before us if it were to pass.
Thank you, Senator. Hannah.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the committee, for your time this evening. My name is Hannah Stern, testifying on behalf of the ACLU of Rhode Island in strong support of both of these bills. Our organization actually opposed the bill in 2009, which ultimately recriminalized sex work in our state, because we believed and still believe that criminalization deprives sex workers of autonomy and adversely impacts their safety. But we ultimately support decriminalization for three core reasons. First, sex work is, of course, a gender-neutral profession, but in Rhode Island, the enforcement of criminalization has disproportionately impacted and harmed sex workers who are women. Second, we believe that criminalization impacts the personal privacy of individuals. And third, because sex work involves consensual parties, police are left to use entrapment techniques to enforce these laws, which we find to be very dubious and troubling. It's just good criminal justice and public health policy to decriminalize sex work for these reasons, but we also think it's more than appropriate to address the consequences that have arisen from its current criminalization. Every so often, what we see is that law enforcement agencies will conduct stings of sex workers and so-called Johns, but the lasting impact of these stings is really just the embarrassment and the penalizing and criminalization of consenting adults for seeking sexual conduct for a fee. But by purporting to help sex workers while actually giving them arrest records, enforcement just makes sex work more difficult and dangerous. The same concern can be found through the raiding of massage parlors under the claim of acting to address human trafficking. But again, this just routinely results in the arrests of individuals for sex work and rarely in the filing of trafficking charges. Human trafficking is a scourge. It should be eradicated, but the conflating of human trafficking with sex work does nothing to actually help trafficking victims, and we emphatically reject the notion that the only way to help victims of trafficking is by arresting them first. Ultimately, decriminalization would just ensure that sex workers are able to prioritize their health and their safety and their autonomy. It would ensure that our criminal justice system is not being utilized to criminalize individuals who are just engaging in consensual behavior or to fulfill a very specific and stigmatizing moral narrative. So we strongly urge passage of these bills. Thank you for your time. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Yes, Senator Archambault.
Well, Hannah, let's start with what you just said about conflating. The term conflating means, if everybody doesn't know, combine, right? Pull them together. Are you saying that the testimony we heard earlier about the sex trafficking doesn't belong in the same conversation or in the same legislation as those who would seek to be decriminalized for prostitution?
I'm not saying that they don't deserve to both be discussed in the context of this type of legislation. What I'm saying is that I think it's really dangerous and inaccurate to say that human trafficking and sex work are the same type of offense.
And you can really make that statement today after all the victim hold on.
Excuse me for 1 second, please. Could I have some quiet in the audience, please?
Let me phrase it this way. Do you have any research, statistical information, data that would prove or support the position you just said that conflating the issue, combining human trafficking with those who are in this sex trade, don't belong in the same conversation?
I think that there have been many policy and research briefs. I'm sure that Ms. Robinson included some in her testimony. I'd be more than glad to send some to the committee as well. There have been many policy and research briefs that have pointed specifically actually to the decriminalization in Rhode Island of sex work during the period where it was decriminalized in our laws, that have actually pointed to the efficacy of decriminalization as a way of increasing sex worker safety, as a way of ensuring sex worker autonomy, and as a way of protecting their rights under the laws.
I just add, Madam Chair, I'd be willing to venture that probably not anyone, less than maybe one, if you had it, of the people behind those issues, and this is just a conjecture, were actually victims and were part of the system of trafficking and sex trade.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions or comments by committee members? Any other comments? Very good, thank you. And with that, I'll ask for a motion to hold for further study 2716. So moved by Senator Lombardi.
There's one more
Second.
person that wants to
Yes, there is more testimony on 2713. That's what you're saying. Yeah, we'll go to that bill next. I have several witnesses on that.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize there were.
Okay, was there anyone else on 2716? Okay, very good. All right, so we have a motion by Senator Lombardi to hold for further study 2716, seconded by Senator Oyer. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Chair Coyne.
Yes.
Senator Archambault.
Yes.
Senator Raptakis.
Yes.
Senator Burke.
Yes.
Senator Oyer.
Yes.
Senator Lombardi.
Yes.
Senator Quezada.
Yes.
Senator Rogers.
Yes.
Senator De La Cruz.
Yes.
Unanimous.
And 2716 is held for further study.